Hello, my name is Barnabas and I'm Head of International Innovation at Design School and Colling. And thanks very much for letting me be here. I'd like to start with 2 points that I think are actually very, very important. And the first one is this. If you think about what's happened with the internet, it actually means that the world is now in the biggest experiment and possibly the longest experiment that's ever taken place. Because we're human beings, as I hope we all are, and here today anyway. And what it is that we have is a biology and a neurology that means that we're used to working in villages, in small groups, and being connected with the people we love around us, and we effectively are now connected with everybody else in the world across languages, across ideas, and across a whole range of different parameters that at some level we're not particularly designed for. And the way that I call this is being perma-connected. And that is the first stage of this extraordinary experiment that we're a part of. And the kind of guys that are here in the audience today are of course going to be asking themselves and often say to themselves that it's really important to be connected and we'll engage each other in why it is that we need to do so. I doubt there's nobody here who hasn't got a Facebook or a LinkedIn profile of some kind. And so it's not being connected that really need to work with. I think we need to work with how we're connected and what we're going to do inside this enormous experiment. That's one of the aspects of what it is that I'd like to talk about. And I'd also like to talk about the fact that I work with design, and within the field of design we also recognise that we need to move from effectively an industrial way of thinking, where we're forming objects to be produced at some level in an industrial society, into understanding them as being agents of change and agents of ways of making relationships across the world. We've gone from the agrarian society, the agricultural society, to the industrial, and now we're in the post-industrial phase. And this demands all sorts of changes from us in the way that we think, and also the way that designers think, building on all the work that was done from Bauhaus and the arts and crafts movement that looked effectively at what it meant to be industrialised. And so the question is not why it is we need to connect. We've got things that we need to deal with across the world, but it's how we're going to do it. And it's that really that I want to talk about today. And so I'm going to say design is about making change now, as well as it is about being, as well as it is with dealing with aesthetics. So here are two very, very interesting points of convergence. The fact that we're perma-connected and the fact that we need to make change. And that change is going to happen across a whole range of different societies and different forces that are driving what these societies are about. Anyway, like I said, I work at Design School and Colling. My name's Barnabas and all those other fine things that I said. And you might also have guessed I'm not Danish, I'm a Brit, and I moved to Denmark. I moved to Denmark quite a number of years ago. And I also did that on the basis of a very powerful impulse. And that impulse was, for all sorts of reasons I won't go into now, that I needed to love the place I loved most, Britain. I needed to move to somewhere where I actually didn't speak the language. It was a very powerful instinct in me, and I did that, and London remains the girlfriend I had to leave but was still in love with. But I got a new girlfriend, I got a new place, and that place was Denmark. And with all the great beauty, joy and disappointment that lies in that. And there's a whole point here, there's a whole point that I want to make, because when I came here, effectively with no Danish at all, apart from being able to say thank you and hello, I very quickly realised that learning Danish wasn't only about learning words. This was an important thing, of course, but I needed to learn something much deeper and more profound. I needed to understand what made the natives tick. And very often in those first days in Denmark, or those first months, I used to call Danes the natives. And I can do that now actually, just to tease you. And I think there was something about this idea of understanding the whole motivations of this tribe that made it really a powerful and very, very strong experience for me. And also at that point was working for the BBC World Service. I was making radio about Denmark. So I was given all sorts of opportunities to go out and not just meet the people in my small but growing circle of friends and family around me, but I was able to meet the culture. And this had an extraordinary effect on me because I was doing everything from talking to drug addicts up to foreign minister level. And so Denmark opened itself to me and its motivations opened itself to me. And that's what it was. It was fantastic and different. But it lay at some level dormant in my whole approach to being here. So far, so good. Now we've got three things. We've got design as a change. We've got I better not do it that way. We've got perma-connection. Don't do that. And we've also got a way of going out and meeting society. Anyway, things happened in my life and I became employed at Design School in Colling. A fantastic institution for many, many reasons, which, because it was actually felt it was like the BBC. It was the two places that I've worked at that were most driven by value rather than an effectively talking about the economies of things. My colleague Gregor Hansen and I were asked to go to Bezalel, it's a university in Jerusalem, and start using some of the methodologies that we were developing around user observation, meeting the societies that we had around us. Because Adi, the man who asked us to come, said this very, very clearly to us. He said, "We recognise that we have largely Jewish students, they're largely Israeli students, and they're working and living in a society that is extremely politicised, extremely territorial, but where there are two narratives, there are two profoundly different narratives that actually don't relate to each other at all. There's the narrative of the development of the state of Israel, and what that was able to bring of safety to Jews after the Holocaust and the Second World War, its technological advances, its advances in social conditions, and so on and so forth, and also its military advances. And there's another radically parallel, completely opposite narrative, and that was the narrative of the displaced Palestinians. It was the narrative of people who had land, had related to the land, but lost it, and were more and more forcibly pushed away from the central part of this territory into its margins. A terrible and painful story. Now, at this point, it is extremely important to me that I don't say I'm taking a position in this. I have a position. I have an interesting, considered position, I hope. But this isn't what this talk is about. Just stop here. How long are we doing now?
8 minutes.
8 minutes. 8 minutes. Okay. I just need to know where I'm at on it. What we were asked to do was to go and work with design students to help them use different methodologies that allowed them to approach the fundament their society built on, to parallel narratives that were often literally at war with each other. And here I'll be showing you a number of pictures around what that's about that help explain that with text. But anyway, we were from Denmark, and what do people think when they think of Denmark? They think of liberty, freedom, ease of life, and great design. So we went there, we went to Bezalel in Jerusalem, and we could really see what the Israeli students wanted of us. They wanted to make things that they thought were funky look even funkier. They just wanted things to look better. And we, coming from Denmark, were some sort of magic key to that happening. This isn't why we were there. Remember, we are there to make them, to try and develop and add the methodologies we do to understand the people we have around us in order to effect meaningful and powerful change. So far so good, but we were met with a wall of resistance. Why on earth were we going to start digging round in something that was effectively very, very painful? And that simply in its stating would touch very, very painful issues of Holocaust, of territory, and of narrative. Now, we've developed this technique, and we call it stone turning. And stone turning is about going out into the world and observing in the same way that I was effectively asked to do when I came to Denmark and tried to understand the natives. Not by projecting value or disdain upon them, but simply asking this question: if you really start looking and seeing, what is it you can see? That's the first thing. And the second thing is, in that active observation of something that is outside yourself, what is it you see inside yourself? What is it that comes through language, the way it is that you go and inhabit your space in the world? Interesting stuff. I'll give you an example. Here we'll see one of the projects the students were asked to do. We sent them directly into Jerusalem in spite of their not particularly well-hidden annoyance at being asked to do so. And we said to them, observe the colours blue and white. That was all. But you have to come back with 200 images of where blue and white appear together. And blue and white, as most of you are probably already starting to recognise, are the colours of the Israeli flag. They're the colours of the nation, in the same way that red and white is of Denmark. Eyes were rolled and people went out. But when they came back, something profound and beautiful had happened. And that is that they were amazed to see how much something that was effectively hidden to them, the colours of the nation, had an effect in the way that they understood the way that their society was organised in its base communication level. But not only in its base communication level, in the subtle way that goes under the radar, so you can sense something potentially, but not necessarily know why it was. The students then, showing examples, were then asked to organise these images in such a way that they could see what patterns started arising from it. Because what we were going to ask them to do was simply take their insight and observation from their own position and the position of the other and see what it is that could arise as a result of it. But in order to understand and cement this understanding, what it is that we asked the students to do effectively was to make conscious that was unconscious. We worked with a number of other paradigms working with food, and I'll run through those when I show the project. That was the first day. And it was a really fascinating experience because, as you can see from these quotes here, from what the students were saying, empathy arose. And it was a kind of empathy that wasn't an empty empathy, that maybe was something like sympathy, the kind of sympathy you might turn on and off for a Facebook post. But it became a real and deep and embedded understanding of what effectively their culture did, and how it had played itself out in the world. I can see I've spoken for over 20 minutes. I've got 1 minute left.
14 now.
I've spoken for 14 minutes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Just trying to get it timed. Hello, Steffi and Adam. And so what we then asked the students to do from this point, and here I'm going to be showing you a number of examples, is looking at how empathy for the other can translate into bridge building, and how empathy for the other can allow a space where your own story is recognised, but it doesn't to the same degree push out the other. So, and here I'm going to be showing a lot of examples of what it is that we did and how it is we can do it. And as you can see from these examples, because every single task allowed us to go in and engage in a wider discussion of how design is able to create meaningful bridges from different parts of society and thereby access change. So my point is allowing empathy to engage with power structures and allowing empathy to engage with your own narrative, we are better charged and better able to approach positively and consciously this extraordinary experiment we have. A, how do we affect change in the world where we need to? And B, how it is that we can work in a permaculture of perma-connectedness. Thanks very much.